If you look at the tables associated with that piece of framework, a lot of it, as you say, is to do with sexuality, and that is gender identity, same-sex relations, how they feel about their gender. And we're asking 4- and 6-year-olds to work about how they feel about their gender. Why are they even questioning their gender would be my point. But the WHO has justified this framework by saying it was made necessary by globalisation and the mass migration of new groups with different cultural and religious backgrounds, the rise of the internet, the spread of HIV and AIDS, and an increase in child abuse, and also the general changing attitudes to sex. To this you reply, and I quote, "It sounds as though bad parenting, incompatible cultural practices, and lacklustre policing of child abuse is being used as an excuse to do away with fundamental child protection standards." Senator Roberts, will this framework solve Europe's problem with child abuse, or will it make it worse?
It'll make it far, far worse, Alexandra. First of all, just look beyond at the start of what's happened here. This mass migration was caused by the United Nations policies. The United Nations wants to abolish national borders and put in place an unelected socialist global governance. They're not my words, they're senior people from the UN, their words. So what they've done is flooded Europe with a variety of cultures that are not compatible with European standards, European life, European values. And then instead of applying the law to these people who are breaking the law and taking predatory action on children and sexual assaults on children, they're condoning it. And they're hoping that Germany, for example, will actually come around and start accepting people from different cultures and their practices. This is complete rubbish. We've got Merkel doing that in Germany. She was doing it in Germany. But we've got globalists at the senior levels of European nations who are condoning this and turning a blind eye to it. The UN caused this problem, and the UN is now standing in the way of solving the problem. All that needs to happen is that the laws of European countries with Christian values need to be upheld. The other thing that needs to happen is that instead of handing over the education of children to the UN, which is all about indoctrination, they started through the universities, and now the teachers are woke quite often. So they're using that legacy from the universities and handing over education, sexuality education, to teachers and to woke institutions. They need to hand it back to the parents, which is where it belongs. Instead of handing it over to the state for indoctrination, they need to keep it with the parents or hand it back to the parents. The UN has been working on this through a multi-pronged strategy since about 2008. It started developing these tactics. But the actual process the UN uses to instill a global governance, destroy nations, destroy religion, destroy faith, destroy values, destroy property rights, destroy basic freedoms in countries, and destroy freedom of choice. That's been going on from the UN since its inception in 1944. The UN was set up to do exactly this, and that's what the UN is doing.
Well, as you point out in the article, the major source of this child sex abuse is actually the people traffickers, which only exist because of the open gate policy that Europe has had to migrants. And I don't see anything in this framework, or at least anything that you've written about, that addresses the abuse of children from child traffickers. But it does not seem to me... Oh, would you like to reply to that?
No. Well, I have many fabulous staff. We've got about 5 fabulous staff in our Senate team, Alexandra. 2 of the researchers are dedicated to the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. They're fabulous researchers, very, very thorough. They go through the World Economic Forum documents, the UN documents, and they found a lot of this information. And so what we've seen is the UN is doing this deliberately, and I think I'm the only office. Pauline Hanson called out Agenda 21 from the UN back in 1996. I called for an exit from the United Nations altogether. We termed it Oz-exit in my first Senate speech in 2016. So we've been on this for a while, but the UN has been coordinating this since its inception in 1944. It was deliberately designed to push the globalist agenda from its inception, and that's what it's been doing. Fabian policies that have been pushed for about 140 years, from originating in Europe, then infecting America. So this is a coordinated attempt to disrupt children, and they have enabled the mass migration, as I said. They've also enabled people smugglers and child molesters to have free reign over children. And what we need to do is recognize that and stop it.